U11L7 is about the tissues of plants and how plants grow. You'll be able to describe the three tissues and then compare and contrast primary versus secondary growth. In your body you have tissues. You have skeletal tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue. Plants, and of course more than that, plants have three kinds of tissue: dermal, vascular, and ground. Dermal tissue is the outer covering, so in this little picture up here it's the brown-orange layer. This helps protect the plant and prevent water loss because we have structures like the cuticle and the stomata, those little mouths. The cuticle is that waxy layer that help keep water in. Vascular tissue, in this picture, it is the purple. Vascular tissue is made out of xylem and phloem, so think about it as the veins, vascular tissue veins of the plant. Plants don't have blood. Your body, you have blood that carries nutrients around and wastes away. Instead of blood and instead of veins, plants have vascular tissue. Xylem transports water in one direction, up. Phloem transports food, basically. Organic compounds would be like sugars and some minerals in both directions, up and down the plant. Lastly, we have ground tissue, and in the picture up above, that's the greenish layer. Here it's these little bundles are vascular tissue. Everything else that you see that's not blue or these bundles is ground tissue. Ground tissue is a filler. It helps protect the vascular tissue as well as do a couple other things. One is photosynthesis. You would have some chloroplasts in this area. We can store food like starches in ground tissue. Since it's a filler, it helps support the plant and keep it upright. And then protection of that vascular tissue, since that's like the veins of the plant, we don't want there to be any damage. So ground tissue is protective as well. When we look at the growth of a plant, they grow at meristems. Remember, we had that word before. That's a growing area. Two main kinds of meristems. An apical is at the end, either up at the top of the stem or the bottom of the root, and this increases the plant's length. A lateral meristem makes a plant wider. It helps it grow out to the side, like in a tree. We can then look at the pattern of growth. A apical meristem, going back here, causes primary growth. It makes the plant get longer. Lateral meristems, this increase in diameter, causes a plant to grow wider, and that's called secondary growth, a growth in plant width. Things that have that cork layer, vines, shrubs, trees, have secondary growth. Now, plants that have secondary growth have a special layer called the cork cambium, and this makes that cork outer layer. Something kind of cool about trees and other woody plants is that you can estimate, and I'm sure you knew this, how old they are by counting their tree rings. However, you may not have known that they can also help you decide what the climate was like during that year if you look at the ring. If there's a lot of water and it's a cooler temperature, it's good conditions, you're going to have nice wide rings like you have here on the outsides of this tree. The reason why? They're growing very well, they're growing pretty fast, conditions are good. However, you have some rings in this tree that are more narrow, and that was probably a drought year where it was hot, very dry. The plant couldn't put all of its energy into growing. It had to conserve energy, and so it wasn't really getting wider. It was probably focusing more just on making food to get by. Quick question for you. Pine tree. Does it have primary growth, secondary growth, or both? And how do you know? Pause me. Think about it. Come back when you think you have the answer. If you said primary growth, you're halfway there. Pine trees do get taller. If you said secondary growth, you're also halfway there. Pine trees get wider. So technically a pine tree would show both kinds of growth because they do get tall and they do get wide. Now that you've seen this video, you should be able to describe the three types of tissues in plants and then compare and contrast primary versus secondary growth.